Paul had always been a creature of the mountains, the snow, and the wild, unrelenting beauty of Alaska. Growing up there, it felt as though the Alaskan wilderness was his second home, a vast, untouched playground where the air was crisp, the terrain unyielding, and every peak seemed to hold a secret only the most daring could uncover. The mountains weren't just places to climb and conquer, they were his sanctuary. They were the backdrop of his childhood, the place where he found solace in the midst of pain, and the silent witness to the intimate bond between a father and son. His father had been his guiding light, the men who first took him into the wild, teaching him how to ski, how to climb, how to survive in the harsh, beautiful expanse of snow-covered ridges. They would spend endless hours on those winter slopes, skis cutting through the pristine snow as they carved their own paths. The days were filled with laughter, with old country songs sung under the shadow of towering evergreens, with the comforting crackle of a fire in their cabin at night. Every moment shared with his father felt sacred, like the world outside their cabin walls didn't exist. But one fateful day, everything changed. Paul's father, the man who had been his rock, his mentor, and his best friend, was diagnosed with cancer. At first, it seemed like a cruel, distant threat, a sickness that could never touch the invincible man who had taught Paul everything he knew. But it did. Slowly, painfully, the cancer stole his father from him. By the time Paul was 22, he was sitting by his father's hospital bed, holding his hand as the men who had shown him the mountains slipped away into the quiet stillness of death. The loss was overwhelming. Paul had never imagined a world without his father in it, and yet here he was, standing in a reality that felt cold and unyielding. For weeks, he wandered through life, numb and hollow, trying to make sense of the gaping hole left in his chest. He returned to the mountains, seeking the peace he once felt there, but the landscape felt different now. The mountains, the cold winds, the snow-covered peaks, they all seemed to mock him. They reminded him of everything he had lost. But time, as it often does, brought healing. Slowly, Paul found his way back to the mountains, not as a grieving son, but as a man finding his way forward. His passion for mountaineering and skiing grew stronger, and with it, his skills. He became one of the best, his name whispered with reverence in mountaineering circles across the globe. His ability to sense danger, to read the mountain's language, became near legendary. He knew the terrain, the snow, the weather patterns as if they were an extension of his own body. And yet, despite his success, the ache of his father's absence never quite went away. There were times when Paul would climb a ridge and feel the ghost of his father's presence beside him, as if the old man was still there, guiding his every move. But it wasn't the same. Nothing could fill the space his father had left. One crisp autumn, after a particularly intense season of work, Paul decided to return to his father's cabin, the place that had once been a refuge from the world. He needed to reconnect with the mountains, to remember the lessons his father had taught him, and perhaps, just perhaps, find some peace with the ghosts of his past. The cabin was perched high on a ridge, isolated and surrounded by towering pines and endless snowfields. It was a place that only the bravest dared to venture to in the harsh winter months, but Paul knew it well. He had spent countless hours there with his father, sipping hot cocoa by the fire after long days of skiing and hiking. The familiar scent of pine trees and the sound of wind howling through the mountains welcomed him as he arrived. The place felt frozen in time, as if nothing had changed since the last time he had been there with his father. But as he stood on the porch, looking out over the vast wilderness, something inside him stirred. The peace he sought felt just out of reach. The mountains were silent, as they always had been, but Paul felt a strange tension in the air, as though something was about to shift. The next morning, after a restless night spent tossing and turning, Paul woke early, eager to get out into the mountains. He bundled up, grabbed his skis, and set out, not knowing exactly where he would go but driven by an undeniable urge to reconnect with the wildness that had once been his refuge. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden light over the snow, and for a moment, Paul felt that familiar sense of awe, the kind he hadn't felt since his father's passing. But as he ascended the ridge, something caught his eye. A faint movement in the trees. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, but then he saw them, wolves. A pack of them, moving through the snow, their sleek forms blending with the shadows of the pines. They weren't coming toward him, but he couldn't shake the sense that they were watching him. There was something unsettling about the way they moved, predatory, yet cautious. Paul's heart quickened. He had heard rumors of increased wolf sightings in the area, and he knew that wolves could be unpredictable, especially in the winter months when food was scarce. His instincts told him to proceed with caution. He wasn't afraid of them, but he wasn't going to take any chances either. He continued on his path, but his eyes never strayed far from the wolves. He knew that in this wild place, he was not at the top of the food chain. As he skied further into the mountains, the landscape began to shift. The weather turned warmer, a strange phenomenon for this time of year. The snow, once firm and stable, began to feel slushy and unstable beneath his skis. His senses were on high alert now. Something wasn't right. The air had a heaviness to it, a pressure that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Paul had been in enough avalanches to recognize the signs. He stopped, scanning the terrain for any signs of danger. It was then that he saw it, cracks forming in the snow beneath him, a warning of what was to come. In a split second, the world seemed to explode around him. The ground beneath his skis gave way, and the avalanche roared to life. The snow came crashing down with a deafening force, and Paul had only seconds to react. His survival instincts kicked in, and he darted to the side, barely escaping the deluge of snow that followed. His heart raced as he watched the avalanche consume the mountain, the once peaceful landscape now transformed into a scene of chaos. But as the snow settled, Paul's eyes were drawn to something that made his blood run cold, a pack of wolves, trapped in the avalanche. They hadn't escaped in time. The very same wolves he had seen earlier were now buried beneath the snow, their fate uncertain. Panic surged through him. He couldn't just walk away. He had to do something. His heart told him that he couldn't leave these animals, especially not after everything they had been through. The wolves had been here first, just like him. He owed it to them to help. With grim determination, Paul began to dig. The snow was thick and heavy, and his arms burned with exhaustion as he shoveled frantically. He didn't stop. He couldn't. The thought of leaving those wolves, of not doing everything in his power to save them, was unbearable. Finally, after what felt like hours, he uncovered the first wolf, an enormous creature, its fur matted with snow and ice. Paul's heart pounded as he continued to dig, revealing 2 more adult wolves and, to his astonishment, 2 young pups, still alive, still breathing. The wolves were weak, but they were alive. As the first wolf emerged, it froze, its intense gaze locked onto Paul. The alpha of the pack, Paul realized. He braced himself, unsure of what would happen next. Would the wolf attack? Would it view him as a threat? But then, something unexpected happened. The alpha wolf, rather than attacking, slowly approached Paul. And then, to Paul's surprise, the wolf did something he had never expected. It licked his face. Paul stood frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. The wolf took another step forward, its muzzle brushing against his hand. And then, as if satisfied that Paul meant no harm, the alpha wolf nodded in a way that seemed almost like a thank you. The pack gathered around him, the wolves nuzzling their pups and licking Paul's hands in a strange, almost affectionate gesture. It was as if, in that moment, Paul had been accepted. He had been given a place among them, not as an intruder, but as someone who had saved them, who had honored the wild. The wolves, with their primal instincts and fierce independence, had recognized something in Paul, a bond, a shared respect for the wilderness that transcended the barriers between species. As Paul made his way back to the cabin that evening, the weight of what had happened settled on him. He had come to the mountains seeking solace, but what he had found was far more profound. The wolves had reminded him of something he had forgotten, that the wild was not just a place of danger, but of connection. It was a reminder that life was about more than survival. It was about understanding, about respect, about finding a way to live in harmony with the world around you. In the days that followed, Paul spent more time on the mountains. His relationship with the land, with the wolves, and with the memories of his father had shifted. The pain of his loss would never fully disappear, but in the wilderness, he had found a new purpose. He had learned to listen to the silence, to the wind, to the snow beneath his feet. And in return, the wilderness had taught him something vital, the importance of survival, not just for oneself, but for the greater world around him. And when he returned home, Paul shared his story with his children. He spoke of the mountains, the wolves, and the lesson he had learned, that life, like the wild, is unpredictable, but it's in the moments of connection, of kindness, that we find redemption. And in that redemption, we find our place in the world. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories.